Welcome to the Earthworks podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon with many of our turf friends that we've met over the past 35 plus years.
Hello all, and welcome to the Earthworks podcast. This week, I'm your host, Jack Higgins, although I'm really double hosting, because how could you sit next to our man, Joel Simmons, and not, and now Joel, wait, we're still speaking here.
I'm not saying anything.
I'm sitting with Joel and Jack and Joel, we're hanging, we're talking.
We're going to talk to each other a lot every once in a while here on the podcast, but it's a good way to kind of get some of our thoughts out and share some ideas. So we want to get some of our guys on. So everybody knows that the Earthworks team is basically a team of agronomists.
Yes.
And we're soil scientists first and foremost. We're mediocre salespeople at best, but we're passionate as hell. And you know, you certainly of all this team are probably the most passionate as to what we've been doing all these years. So it's been an interesting year already. I mean, we have had a very cold and wet spring here in the Northeast,
which I like.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't think a superintendent loves it.
No, I'll tell you what. If there's no sunshine, then I don't love it either.
Yeah.
But if the sun's out, and today maybe I'm just in a good mood because it's like
it's sunny. It's a beautiful sunny day, but it's
cool
about 65. I love this temperature.
Yeah. It was actually only 49 pulling in here.
Oh, is it? Oh, so it's even cooler.
Yeah,
I think it's going to get up into the mid 60s. But it's interesting. I talked to our dear friend Walter Pritchett this morning, and he was telling me that he's got Zoysia and Meyer Zoysia on his property, and the Meyer has kicked in, but the Xeon's slower to come out.
So Walter's at Hertzborn in Louisville.
In Louisville, and they're having a cold, wet spring too.
Yeah, and he's hosting.
Yes, he is
for the first time this year on the PGA Tour.
What used to be the Balsterol, the
Barbasol.
Sorry, Walter. And
I'll be out
July. Yeah, I'll be out there. It'll be fun.
So I've actually heard that a couple times, and have seen it myself. The difference between Xeon and Meyer, they talk about, and particularly in the springtime, right? You know, waking up.
Yeah, and it's not uncommon for a lot of varieties of grasses when it's cold and wet like this.
Right.
So you know and I think I kind of stole this from you, but the suggestion I gave him was to get out there with magnesium, and so he's going to spray some MagVantage. You just suggested some Protein Plus on top of that, which will just give it a little push, but that magnesium starts the photosynthesis process.
That's right. Yeah, that is the central nutrient in the whole chloroplast deal.
So and we've seen this, you know, year after year after year. When we first made MagVantage, we'd been recommending things like Epsom salts, which was working. But, you know, we got together with Lawrence and we put together MagVantage, brought in a bunch of different forms of magnesium. And then, of course, all the Earthworks goodies, 30 plus raw materials. And really were able to kick that magnesium into solution and be taken up by the plant.
Yeah, let's break that down a little bit. I mean, what is kind of special about like something like MagVantage over Epsom salts, and why? You know, what did Lawrence do that really what did he do in the formulation?
And what's the answer to that?
Eco-adaptive.
Thank you.
Eco-adaptive
I knew you would get that.
Chemistry. Yeah, man.
Yeah. So, and it's funny, I talked about that yesterday at an academy down in North Carolina. And this eco-adaptive technology, which is basically Lawrence's model of following Mother Nature, right?
Mimicking nature.
And I love that. I just, when we started talking that way, or he started talking that way, it just made perfect sense. So when you only have a linear product like Epsom salts, you know, magnesium sulfate, it's gonna be overpowering. But when you put together all the ingredients that we did in MagVantage, multiple forms of magnesium, lots of carbon sources, and then balanced it all so nothing was overpowering anything else.
And
that's eco-adaptive.
The way that the root zone microbes react to that, like they get shut down by a single source overpowering, particularly sulfates, chlorides.
Right.
They get shut down by that.
Yeah.
So that's the idea, you know, that's the approach.
You know, I've been saying this in the academies, and I say this to guys all over the country. If you watch no other podcast than the ones that we have done over the years with Lawrence, you will learn a wealth of information. And I had 2 or 3 guys come up to me at an academy yesterday in Greenville, South Carolina, saying, you know, I love the Lawrence Mayhew podcast, and I brought him in 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
you know,
he was just on.
I said, Lawrence, you're the star of the show, dude. I mean, here's this chemist, and he's just a great human being, and he's funny, but dry. But he is a wealth of information, and if you watch no other podcast, don't watch me and Jack. Watch Lawrence. Forget this thing. Go turn this off and go pull up a Lawrence Mayhew podcast. But he is wonderful and brilliant, and man, the guys, you've heard this. We had a couple guys come up to us at the GIS.
Oh yeah.
Well, is Lawrence here? Is Lawrence here? No, Lawrence isn't here.
Oh yeah, it really is something special.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's something that's always been special about Earthworks is that you found this community. I'm not saying you founded this community. I found
it. Yeah,
this
yeah. Well,
community.
actually, Jerry kind of found it, or
well,
Jerry,
you found Jerry.
Jerry brought the community to the table, and it's funny because I met. I haven't even shared this with you yet, but I met yesterday. We're doing a project that's going to help us take some of the odor out of the manure.
I've heard little bits of this.
Yeah. So I mean, and I shouldn't say a whole lot because we may not get the odor out of the manure, but it's biological. And I, working through, people here and there. And then I find out that the guy who is actually building all these biologicals is a guy that we've known for years. Jerry worked with for years ago. And when he found out, who he was talking, oh, that's Joel and Jerry. It's like, oh, what a small world this is. But so we've been talking about biologicals. When I'm talking about biologicals, I'm talking about bringing in some inoculants, which has not been the traditional Earthworks approach.
Right.
It's really been about feeding the soil and letting the natural population of the soil, the microbiome of the soil, to really have the opportunity to bloom. And as I talk about in the academy, it's chemistry, physics, and then ultimately biology setting the stage, and then feeding them and letting them go.
That's right. We've always been about creating the space, creating the environment, a lot physical space, and letting the existing microbes do the work after you activate them, after you feed them with some good carbon-based fertilizers. However,
I mean, I think now we're going to go down the rabbit hole of finding, the things that are coming out now that are really, really powerful. Biologicals. When I say biologicals, some mycorrhizia, some bacterium, bacillus.
Myco 333 has been the rock star of Earthworks for the last
really
10 years.
And every time I play with it at my house, I'm just amazed by it. And I tell the stories at all of my classes of the landscapers that call me in the fall and scream and bitch about the fact that it takes them an hour to pull the petunias out, because the roots are so strong. I'm like, that's not a complaint we're willing to take. But, it's funny you say that, because I was thinking a lot about this. We're very concerned about, as a business, is it the right thing to go with a liquid mycorrhiza? Anytime we start talking about liquid mycorrhiza or a mycorrhiza that's in a powder form that we put in solution, you're still only getting ounces per thousand, versus when you put down the 333, the micro replenish, you're putting down pounds per thousand. So it will never replace pounds per thousand. When you're doing construction, when you're putting down sod, when you're trying to seed a new seeded area, pounds per thousand is the way to go, because you're going to build that base and get that mycorrhiza in there.
Well, and but however, we're, and when you're talking land management, you're spot on.
Yeah.
But we work in all sorts of different businesses.
Oh yeah.
In all sorts of different markets. We work in plant health care, and we work and we work in nursery care. We work in establishment in potted plants.
And we're doing cannabis greenhouses we're starting to really play with a lot of stuff, which is kind of cool.
So you can make differences with liquids, with something like that in a small pod.
Oh no, there's no question there's going to be differences. I guess what I'm suggesting is that it's not necessarily replacing. It's not an ease. It's not a function of ease. It's a function of adding on to what we've already begun with the pounds per thousand. And I've been talking a lot about that this year. Pounds per thousand versus ounces per thousand. You and I have talked about this. It just feels like a lot of superintendents, are going away from granular applications. which I get, especially when you're talking about salt buildup and salt fertilizers. But when you're talking about carbon-based, this is your foundation.
I've run in, no, not run into this. I mean, this has just kind of been the existence of golf course management,
Yeah.
certainly for
And I get it.
a long time.
Yeah, I get it.
However, the superintendents that have been very successful with this minimalistic
Yeah.
approach and with this kind of straight liquid approach, set themselves up with a foundation
Right.
in the fall, particularly.
Pounds per thousand.
Yeah, for sure. And here's the next the something I found really interesting are the guys that do this with Myco Replenish.
Right.
They actually, because they've already surrendered to the I'm being very lean here.
Yeah.
I want to be lean.
Yeah.
I don't want to load up nitrogen. I don't want to even load up a whole lot of complete fertilizer that's going to release.
Right.
I want to be lean. So they'll use 5 pounds per thousand, maybe twice or maybe just once of Myco Replenish. So as far as NPK, that's
or 5-4-5, something that builds foundation.
But I like it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm particularly talking about when they've got aerification holes open
Yeah.
in the fairways and they're like, you know what? It's worth it to get this biological response, to inoculate this mycorrhiza and get that sort of, full biological soil management approach
Right.
in the land.
I've been seeing this. I've been doing a lot of academies this fall, especially down south, with Marshall Evans, our newest agronomist. And it's been really interesting to see how many people come up to me at these academies and are really understanding and excited about soil biology. And this is new. I mean, I've been doing this, as you know, forever. And, I was one of the lone voices in the whole biological soil management thing, but that's not the case anymore. And they're coming, oh yeah, I was doing something like yours for a while. I was doing this and this and this, but this looks a lot easier. I mean, one guy yesterday at the academy came up to me and said, yeah, I've been spraying humate and I got a drum of fish meal. I've got a drum of kelp. I've got some molasses and I got, but my guys, the guys just can't figure out how to do it. I said, well, I got a solution for you.
C3.
C3.
Come on.
But the fact that, and my point is that it's really cool to see guys starting to understand the value of carbon materials. And it still baffles me. It just blows my mind that you see academics that'll saying, well, we put down carbon fertilizer. We didn't see any more carbon in the plant. It's just like, there's no comment that you can even make to that stupidity. It's just amazing that it would even come out of somebody's mouth. But, again, the whole point that we make is that we're trying to feed bugs, but now we're going to go down a road of finding bugs that can push us to the next level.
Okay, so yeah, we started this by saying that this was bugs that you're looking at reducing odor in the compost.
Yeah.
Okay, so like there's a whole bunch of functions here.
Yeah, there's so I mean you can kind of tell I'm all jacked up about this.
Yeah.
So I got this. We started a trial and it was day one, and you could smell a reduction of some of the odor in the manure. And this is a big problem. Not so much for the golf guys because they've all worked around it fairly effectively, and a couple guys even.
I got this feedback yesterday. That was like, I would like to use it, but I can't use it.
Yeah, universities. We've had a lot of cases at universities, right? Schools.
This was
the lawn care.
This was a township,
with townships. Yeah, and so I mean, there's a real issue there, and the reality is that it's the best way to build the soil. But guys, I had a couple guys come up to me, a lawn care operator yesterday, come up to me and says, I put it out, in a day it's gone. Or if I put it down in front of a rain, it's gone.
Done.
If I irrigate, if I can run a cycle of water over it, it's gone. The smell's gone.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, it's a give and take. You got to put it down.
Well, there's a lot of places that are not irrigated.
Right.
There's a lot of places that the rain's supposed to come and then it doesn't come. And
right. Exactly.
So it's a problem worth solving. I guess.
Yeah, but the most of the guys work through it because they know that at the end result is so much better than the very limited amount of time. But if we can get rid of the odor, man, that's a game changer in an industry that would love to see more ability to apply some carbon materials.
Heck yeah.
Yesterday's academy had a lot of lawn care operators, and man, it was a great roundtable conversation. The one question I asked them, there's 30 some lawn care guys in there. How many of you guys are doing a la carte programs? How many of you guys are, putting the tag on the doorknob every time you apply? And it was about half. And then the other half, and I was really surprised by this, they're starting to realize that, yeah, I used to do that, but all it does is encourage me to over apply. And you hit a wall at some point with that. And and they were starting to realize that it was different. And then there were two guys in that room and one of them and I'm not going to remember his name, unfortunately. He'd worked with our buddy Frank Lopes down in Georgia, and they'd been using Earthworks for years. And he goes, "Oh yeah, I've reduced my inputs by a lot." One guy who was a lawn care operator who loved what we were doing, had been using products like ours and some of ours. But he had a boss who was the owner of the company. It was old school. He goes, "Yeah, I kind of have to sneak this in a little bit, but so I kind of don't tell him what I'm doing." Mm-hmm. But then he comes out to the lawns and he says, "Wow, what are you doing out here?" Well, I tell him, he goes, "Oh, well, I don't believe in that." So, well, you just told me you loved it.
How many of those stories have we heard
over the years? Yeah.
But it's funny. I mean, that's like the same as the USGA story.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, it's funny that you brought this up because this is another thing that I was wrong about, by the way. Because
let me write this down. Hold on.
Yeah, Jack was wrong.
What's the date?
Because you as soon as we had a big brainstorm about the lawn care business, maybe 5-6 years ago, and you said, "This is the thing. We can help them be more profitable."
That's what we talked about. We talked about
right from
money.
The start.
We didn't talk about agronomy as much as you can make more money.
You said
businessmen.
They got to reduce the overhead.
Yeah,
that's it. Like reduce the inputs, reduce the overhead, reduce the
change the business model, get away from the a la carte, tags that hang on the doorknob, and that encourages you now to under apply and make as much money as you can.
Right.
And everyone to a T said that in that room. I interviewed a lot of these guys, and they all said, "Yeah, once we went to a fixed price, now we're in control of the program. All we had to do was make sure that Mrs. Jones' lawn was the best in the neighborhood, and there was a lot of ways that we could do that. But we were able to do it and reduce inputs and put a lot more money in our pockets."
Mm-hmm.
And then the guys that were coming to us and using Earthworks, they were starting to use and I'm going to say this carefully, the organic-based program. And so not only did they not lower their prices, they raised their prices, reduced their inputs, and put a lot. I had 3 or 4 lawn care companies say, "Oh yeah, I raised my prices, I reduced my inputs, and I made a lot more money." And and the same model holds true of the golf course guys. Mm-hmm. I had a golf course guy. Oh, you'll love this actually, and I'm going to get him on there. But a superintendent, I won't mention his name until I get him on the podcast. But you know the picture that I have of the thatch cake.
Yes.
So it's a picture that I use a lot, and I've even put it on the podcast, where it was a situation where a superintendent, was actually a student of mine. He'd inherited he took a job at a course, and the superintendent prior had been using a lot of synthetic nitrogen and then top dress. So you had this layered effect in the profiler. And it took him a number of years to break that all up and start to digest that out and humify it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling that story, and at break, superintendent comes up to me and goes, "I want to show you something." He pulled out his phone and he showed me the thatch cake on his property, and he said, "I've been here for 6 years. This is what it looks like now, and it's perfectly humified."
Wow.
I was
blown away.
I was blown away.
Oh, I love that.
And it was a great story, and I'm going to get get him on the podcast.
Well, here's the next question. He did that with us? He did that with some Earthworks?
He did use some Earthworks, and he's, again, there's lots of ways to skin this cat.
Well,
but
and
the bottom line is it's still biological soil management.
That's right. Good point.
I mean, I think what Earthworks brings to the table, like this other gentleman was saying, we just make it a lot easier,
Mm-hmm.
This guy had 4 drums of different things that he had to mix each time he put a tank in. I said, 1 drum of C3 will do all of that, and you can tell your applicator that just put a gallon per acre in, and it's easy math.
We make it a lot easier, and we're
much more complex.
Yeah. Now wait, personality wise,
yes, that's without a doubt.
I contain multitudes. Is that what you're saying?
Well, not all of us can wear that sweater, But yeah, we're much more complex, and our products are much more complex.
Oh man, that's right.
But it was exciting. It was neat to hear this coming. I mean, and these are things for me, having done this for now 30 some years. This is all new. I'm seeing these guys come up to us like all juiced up and excited.
That's fun. Plus, we got spring fever, dude. I love it.
Yeah, I know. I think we do.
The springtime is the
best. It's flowering. We got flowers on the trees.
And the grass is like the chlorophyll color that you get, the photosynthesis color you get in the spring. It's just
and and you'll love this as well. But this time of year, the best part of this time of year is the first cut of grass. That smell of when the first time your mower goes out there and you smell that, I'm like, oh my God, it's like the greatest smell of all times.
For sure.
And it's never like that in the summer. It's like, another drudgery.
Yes, right.
And it's drier.
And it's hay.
Yeah. But that first cut, because it comes up and it's got beautiful green, and you cut it, and that smell, it's unbelievable.
Nice. This though, and Oli talked about this in the podcast last week. He said, however, when you don't know what you're doing in the springtime, you can quickly ruin the whole season.
You can.
By being too fat and juicy and encouraging it to be too fat and juicy in the spring, the plant just burns out.
Yeah. Well, when you pump it full of stuff, I mean, but you walked his property. I mean, what do we call it? The best lawn in America. By the way, we got an awful lot of shit for that. We got a lot of guys sending us YouTube comments. But it was all in good fun.
I said two things. The most famous lawn in America.
Most famous lawn.
Yeah, that's what I like.
Very true.
Yeah, and I like terms like that. America's greenkeeper.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
And the most beautiful lawn.
And if you're not following where we're going, last week we interviewed a dear friend of ours, Oli Poole, who is just basically a homeowner who loves to stripe his lawn.
He's passionate, man.
And
that's what comes through.
He's amazingly passionate. He's a great guy, and he's got one of the most beautiful lawns. But I think I shared this with you. I sent me a picture. I said, "Hey, Oli, there's a little brown spot over," and he went nuts. And I knew I would get him.
Oh, you got his goat.
I got him going, and there was nothing there. I mean, it was a little. It might have been a shadow on the photograph, but he was like all juiced up. But he's pounding the place with Myco and A22.
Well, I guess part of the Oli story that I really like a lot too is that he's really a good greenkeeper. He's really a smart guy.
He's very smart,
and I've watched him.
Yeah.
I've watched him learn this. Like I've known him now for 6-7 years. Like he went from kind of not knowing and to now really knowing a lot and having a very kind of patient and deliberate and consistent approach.
It's very smart.
Yeah.
And he's got the Fescue Freaks little podcast that he does with all of his buddies that just sit around and drink some beers or whiskey and talk about cutting the grass.
Yeah, that's Keep Off the Grass.
Keep Off the Grass.
Yeah, that's the podcast. And then the Facebook group is the Fescue Freaks.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry.
And then he's got his own YouTube channel as well. You can check him out on Instagram. Yeah. He's out there on everything. He's great. But the other part of what he did, the part of what he did is not what you see on top when you fly the drone over. Yeah. He built soil.
Well, the whole left side, if you look at the front of his house, that whole left side was an add-on. He bought that extra piece, and the soil was radically different. And it took him a while. I mean, you could see what I was kind of busting his stones about. You could see the difference in that area. But in a matter of 3 years, it's
like a rocky, sandy shale sort of.
It's in where is he?
He's
Charlotte area.
Yeah, but he's near a quarry, as he explains. Okay. So it's not that kind of red clay. Although he does have that on his property, because at one point when he didn't really know what he was doing, he took in a bunch of fill and a bunch of compost. He tried to input soil. And when we started talking, I said, that's not what we do, dude. Earthworks builds soil.
Soils, yeah.
It takes the existing land and it humifies it.
Right,
it grows it. We grow topsoil. That's what we do. We talked about the Oli podcast. We've got other cool podcasts coming up.
Yeah, we do. We're going to have a lot of cool stuff coming on this spring. I know Kevin's working on a couple of very cool things. I just talked to my dear friend and the superintendent at Quail Hollow Country Club, Mr. Keith Woods, and we're going to be sponsoring the PGA tournament. His a sponsorship for Keith.
That's right.
Down at
PGA
Quail
Championship.
PGA Championship tournament in a few weeks from now.
That's right.
And you know, I say this every time I talk about Keith. First of all, he may be the best superintendent in the country, and secondly, Quail Hollow is hands down one of the best places to see a tournament. I mean, yeah, Augusta, I've heard about that place. It's not bad. It's got some decent stuff going on, but when going to Quail, so we go and we stay downtown in Charlotte. We we literally walk right out of our hotel onto the little train. It drops us right off of the bus and it drops us right at the front door. And Quail Hollow is special. And Keith is, he's the hardest working man in the business. I talked to him yesterday. I said, man, I would love to get you on the podcast. I know you're busier than all get out. I goes, no, Joel, I'm going to be here 7 days a week. I can easily give you an hour. So we're going to get Keith on before the tournament and he can kind of fill us in on what's going on.
Hey, that's exciting. He's such a gracious guy.
He's so gracious.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Such a class act.
For sure. And he's one of the hardest working guys out in the business, but that whole country club is one of like the hardest working golf venues going. Like they're built to host.
They're built. That's what, and he says that. And the neat thing is, and we've been he's been a great partner of ours every year after whatever he's doing, either the Wells Fargo, the PGA Championship. They basically tear the place to shreds and rebuild it all. So we're in there with Renovate and Myco and Zeolite and all the stuff. I mean, he's, like I said, he kind of realized years and years ago the value of putting carbon into that soil and all those minerals. So it's been really, really good. And we've got a couple other tournaments we're going to be sponsoring.
Congressional's hosting.
Congressional, we're going to be sponsoring something in Olympic Club. We're going to be sponsoring, of course, Walter's thing out at Hertzborn. Sorry, Walt. But there's a bunch of those things, and we're thrilled to be able to do it. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, some other exciting stuff coming up, and I'm going to have a couple podcasts dedicated to this over the year, maybe the next 2 years, is of course FIFA.
Yeah.
We've got the Club World Cup this summer,
right, and
then next summer the World Cup.
Yeah, this is going to be pretty cool. I mean, they're doing so much stuff. I mean, a lot of the big stadiums, our friends like, Tony Leonard at Philadelphia and New England is doing stuff. And of course, the Chiefs. I mean, a lot of the guys that we've had on the podcast are now ripping their place up and putting in soccer fields in the middle of their stadium. And it's going to be very cool. I mean, it's going to be a lot of work for these guys, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And there's little venues and big venues, and they're all over. I mean, there's this every time I've talked to somebody, he's like, "Oh yeah, we're doing this and this." I'm like, "What?"
Well, it's a huge boon for our industry.
Oh yeah,
because every one of these teams, and it's 2 summers in a row now, need a home base.
Right.
So a whole, but like you said, a whole bunch of kind of smaller venues and colleges, and there's are picking up a team as a home base.
Right.
So
they're a host. Yeah,
they're a host. There's a lot of
it's going to be cool, and we'll talk a lot about that over the next year, which is kind of cool.
Yep.
Another thing came up that Walter and I were talking about, and I need to probably pick your brain. But we started talking about some of the technologies, and we've talked about this. We've got, everybody knows of the robotic mowers, but Walter and I started talking about drone sprayers and how they're going to start to change our industry as well. And I don't know a whole lot about it. We've had a couple of folks in New Jersey that have been pretty big on it, but I'm gonna want to kind of go down that road and explore that. He was telling me that you could get 3 drone sprayers for the price of 1 big boom sprayer.
Well, here's the deal with
which is kind of cool.
This is, look, you and I can talk about it now, because we're gonna have to kind of we're gonna have to think about things from a different angle. With the drone sprayer, you're using an incredibly low
volume, and they're flying by like 30 miles an hour.
So we have to consider that our biological liquid products, our biologically active liquid products, our liquid products that we're looking to treat the root zone with, aren't going to get pushed down by a lot of sprayer volume.
Right.
However, we make products and we activate the plant in a way that the plant becomes the superhighway.
Right.
The plant
Pulls it
moves
in.
all that energy down into the root system. That's what the whole rhizophagy cycle is all about.
Yeah.
That's what root exudates are all about. Like that we are affecting biology through the plant as well. So, you know,
it's there's a lot. I mean, it's and again, I'm closer to the end of my career than the beginning, and I'm still excited about all that. I mean, you mentioned rhizophagy. There was a huge article. The whole magazine at Acres USA last month was pretty much dedicated to rhizophagy. I mean, it's the talk of the town in sustainable and regenerative agriculture. You know, and there were some really good articles talking about it, and there was one that came. You know, one of the articles started talking about this gentleman who wrote a book called "The Fourth Phase of Water." Which is fascinating. And what he's talking about is, you know, we all know water is in gas and liquid in solid form. The fourth phase is what the rhizophagy system is doing by moving material through the plant in almost a gel form. And so it's the glomalin-esque material, but it's a fascinating. I mean, and again, I know this much about this, but we're
into it.
But I bought the book.
Yes, and you read.
I bought the book and I read, and so and it's funny because Lawrence bought the book, and he's angry with me because I bought the book on Amazon and it showed up in a day. He bought the book on Amazon and he goes, I think it's going to China and then over to India and then up to England, and I don't have the damn book yet. But it's fascinating, just the ideas. But the whole rhizophagy thing is really a hot subject, and we've talked about it here on the podcast. We talk about it in our academies, but it's this whole idea of the symbiosis between microbiology, the microbiome, and the plant,
and the uptake of nutrient
and
through the actual physical body of microbes.
Fascinating. Just I mean, think about this. I mean, how long have you and I both been in this business, and we're learning that? I mean, I really think that we're really at the very beginning of a wealth of information that hopefully will come out. Certainly in your lifetime. I mean, I hope I can hang around long enough to catch a lot of this. But even in my lifetime, we've gone through the mycorrhizae explosion and the whole glomalin discovery that Sarah Wright found at the USDA Research Center. Dr. White's work on rhizophagy, Elaine Ingham's work on the soil food web. These are all things that have come out since I've been in this business, and pretty much since you've been in this business.
Oh yeah,
really.
for sure.
And I think we're just scratching the surface between the soil biology, some of the technologies that we're.
I mean, that it gets to get into this turf and ornamental business.
Yeah.
Like we're a hip group to take this in.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of a niche little thing. I like that it lines up directly with the whole playability focus in golf.
Right.
That
yes.
we're trying to be lean. We're trying to be fast, firm and fast, and utilize nutrients very efficiently.
And we need recovery, which this is going to also do. I mean,
totally.
I mean, there's, I say this all the time, but where did Mother Nature come out and put 40,000 people walking over 100 acres? I mean, it doesn't happen like that in nature. But so we're such a unique environment, but we are a cover crop.
Yes.
And we are very, very biologically active. If people start really putting that into their forefront, they're going to, I keep trying to tell guys, look, every day you go out there and walk around, think about the soil biome that's under your feet and how many guys, how many of these little critters are working for you for free, 24/7, and
giving you a better product.
All you got to do is help them along a little bit.
Right.
You don't even have to pay them. They don't ask for days off. They don't, they don't call in sick. It's wonderful.
You get better turf, better plants.
Yeah.
And every bit of this is also mitigating climate change.
Yeah. Sequestering carbon.
Yeah. Every time we talk about building soil, growing topsoil, humifying, all of that is synonymous with mitigating.
Right.
Mitigating climate change.
One of my favorite podcasts that I've done recently was with Kevin Cooper at Syngenta, who's doing all the he's doing all the meters in the soil, and one of the things that really came out of that is that and we also interviewed our friend Dave Wilbur, who's doing turf rat and monitoring moisture in the soil. And, every time I talk to these guys, it just reminds me of how important moisture management is to the soil biome.
Mm.
Because if we go through these roller coasters of moisture within the soil, if we allow the soil to dry out for even a short period of time, that whole biological cycle falls as well. Microbiology needs to have moisture. So they have to have moisture in order to continue to proliferate. As that moisture level drops, so does their activity.
Oh, interesting.
And not that we want it wet, obviously, but it's that sweet spot that we're, and that's where technology is going to help not only the management of the grass, obviously, but when you're thinking about the management of the grass from a moisture standpoint, also put in your head that the management of that moisture is maintaining a strong level of that soil biome. The populations of microbes, as that soil moisture drops, are going to drop, and they're going to be a lag behind when you start to bring the moisture back. So you're doing that roller coaster with microbiology because of moisture management. And the technology is very cool. The technology that's coming to our table and what it can do for our passion of this whole soil biology thing. So
yeah, we got a lot of great stuff going on.
A lot of cool things going on right now, and stuff like that. Right now, Marshall Evans, we're recording this. Actually, I think we're going to play this today, but we're recording this on a Thursday. Marshall Evans is down with John Riley's group at Longboat Key, and they're doing earthworks injections with their new wet jet.
Oh, okay,
material,
cool.
Which is very cool. Anything that gets material down into the ground, the dry jet, the wet jet. I mean, these are all great tools that are out there, but they've been using a lot of earthworks in this. And if you follow Marshall Evans on social media, he's very active. And I'm sure he's already posted a number of pictures of this, but it's just very cool to be able to find technologies that can get, stuff down into the
make
ground.
the greenkeeping job easier.
Yeah, make it easier.
Yeah, we have
cool
soil
tool.
amendments that you need to get, that should get down into the root zone. Boom, we can put them right there. The other one that I love talking about and love seeing in action is everyone that has so much success establishing with a hydroseeder, running the earthworks granular right through that hydroseeder.
Yeah.
It's like, this is perfect. This is exactly the way that you should be using this product. You want to get it some soil contact. You want it up with the seed.
Yeah.
And it is then the spark plug to establishing that soil to plant, to microbe, to, we're not
Rhizophagy.
Yeah, man. We're not inputting the topsoil. We're making the topsoil on site.
Yeah. And we've said this a number of times. It was, Kevin Hicks and I were at Acres, and farmer after farmer after farmer came up and spoke to these large groups and showed the stories of how they built topsoil. And it can be done. And there's no question that it can be done. And it's interesting, that we're seeing that kind of, technology, if you will, come into this, turf and ornamental. But if you think about it, I mean, there's very little difference. Yeah, we're growing grass as opposed to corn or wheat or whatever, but it's still the same soil environment. They're still dealing with the same microbiology.
Well, we're growing a perennial plant
We're growing
that grows
crop,
a bigger root system than an annual crop, like corn or grass or corn or wheat. We actually are doing the most of the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
Us grass growers in this whole kind of sequestering carbon.
I knew you were going there, and that's exactly right. I mean, we're cover crop. That's what regenerative agriculture is really promoting heavily, is that don't ever let your soil be barren, because first of all, you're pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. I mean, I'm absolutely convinced, and I don't certainly want this to sound political, but I'm absolutely convinced that we as agronomists can solve, the greenhouse gas problem, because all we need to do is just make sure that the soil is working, because that's where all the carbon goes. And we have this little creature that's called a plant that will go up into the atmosphere and pull it all down and put it into the soil where we want it. And it's wonderful. I keep showing that picture, and where I'm going to go here is that picture of that beautiful profile that is humification. And I will always ask the superintendents in the classroom, how many of you would really want this if you inherited this? And most of them look at it, well, I don't know, because we've been taught that organic is bad.
Well, because the picture is a constructed, shelled out sand root zone on a green, and it's not the color. The sand is not the same color as it was when it went in.
Right.
That's basically the difference. Exactly. It's humified. However, structurally, and in terms of the way the water infiltrates, and in terms of the way the gases are exchanged, it functions the same. So don't be afraid. It's just that when you dry it down to 9% volumetric moisture, you still have a nice turf.
And it's the playability is superior to thatch. Superior. I mean, you don't get the ball coming in and hitting splat
because you can't draw it down. You can't drive that down.
Yeah, I mean, that. So the question is, well, I don't want that much organic. Well, yeah, you do if it's good organic matter. But what about playability? Isn't that going to just like splat? He goes, no, it's
out here. It's firm.
And think about it. I mean, it doesn't. It's counterintuitive. So I would have sat in that classroom and said the same thing until somebody said to me something different, or I saw it for myself.
There you go.
But that's what we're seeing. So, all right, Jack.
All right, that's it.
We got things to do.
Yeah.
Places to be.
Moving on.
But do join us in the next couple of weeks. We're going to have some pretty cool things on there. I'll let you wrap up because
we've got
this is your
podcast. Yeah, I'm hosting. So tune in for Joel and Keith Wood, who's hosting the PGA Championship at Quail Hollow in the next couple of weeks. Tune in for the conversation about FIFA. We're going to have a couple of groundskeepers on talking about hosting. And stay tuned into the Earthworks podcast because we do cool stuff.
Yeah, I think we do. I think we do very cool stuff. But thank you.
All right. Thank you all.